recording for this part of this session. I do, and as a disclaimer, I do put these recordings. Oh, let me let people in first, and then I'll welcome everybody and say my disclaimer. Hi, welcome everybody to Grant Writing in the Age of AI. Grant Writer's Code of Ethics for AI Usage is our topic today. We're always happy to go off topic as needed. Welcome. I do like to always give a little disclaimer that I am recording this. I do put it up on YouTube. If anybody wants to say anything off the record, I'm very happy to pause the recording. So just let me know. But otherwise, we do try to get this information out there that we discuss. We think there's not enough conversations happening about the use of AI in grants, and want to kind of amplify some of the conversations that are happening in these spaces. So I'm Melody Hernandez. I'm one of the co-facilitators, along with Fielding Jezreel. And we are happy to hold this discussion. It is a discussion. Happy to have folks unmute and take part. And so yeah, so our topic for today is Grant Writer's Code of Ethics for AI Usage. Very curious how folks are feeling about ethics in AI, and also happy to have folks talk about any other discussions, AI topics that are outside of our discussion topic. But Fielding and I have a lot to say, but first I'll open it to the floor in case anybody came with some burning thoughts on ethics and AI.
And I think part of the reason we selected this topic was just feeling like there are a lot of ethical mines to avoid, um, but without really a strong voice in the grants profession giving us really practical guidelines around ethical usage, right? So there have been dozens and dozens of conversations that have happened around ethics, and I think the laundry list of ethical concerns is long, but I don't know that I have seen a real clear set of guidelines that um, feel tangible enough to follow or not follow, right? How do I know if I am using AI ethically? And I don't feel like that set of standards is out there. So I was really curious to discuss with anyone who wants to chime in about what might be on a code of ethics for grant professionals related to AI. Um, and at least start there. And if others want to take this in a different direction, we can certainly do that too.
Well, and I think one thing that I think kind of makes it more challenging to have this discussion is that AI does change very quickly, and ethical conversations seem to move very slow. So sometimes it seems like we might land on a place on a certain topic, and then maybe there's changes in AI. I think, for example, there was a lot of ethical concerns for a while because of a lot of these, especially like the LLMs were using um, the content that you would give them in ways that, folks didn't agree with. And then there were some AI models that were said, or LLMs that were, said, oh, we're going to be more ethical in how we do it. And then walked back on that ethics. So then that kind of became like okay, like is there even an option of an LLM that's uh not kind of unethical in how they're using the content you're giving them? And that's a challenging, conversation to have, especially when it changes so quickly. There's just a new agreement, user agreement. Okay, sign this, agree to this new user agreement, and you know.
In For those of you who have access to the AI curriculum I have, I'm pretty sure it's in there, but I talked about why I switched to Claude and was very clear that the only reason I switched to Claude is because the tools available were so far superior, and it was in no way an indication of how I feel about the ethics of uh, the company. And I'm so glad I said that because like a week later, all of the news reports came out that Claude is now using that really, really awful um, uh, power plant right outside of Memphis, like the one that is just absolutely notorious, set up by OpenAI. Well, guess what? Claude's now using that same infrastructure. And so similar to, power plants or, gas systems or like whatever, right? A lot of this infrastructure is used by multiple companies. And so as far as I can tell, there is no ethical AI company that has tools that are useful enough to make it competitive on the market. When that happens, I will be delighted. But I would say the argument has always felt a little stale to me when we're talking about the big three or even the big four. Like none of them are ethical. They're all companies designed to create maximal reward to their shareholders, right? So let it go. At least the try to figure out if it's Claude or it's Gemini or it's OpenAI. It's none of them are ethical. So.
And I would maybe push back on the let it go part and say do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do something about it in a political and advocacy
Mhm.
way
Mhm.
of, hey, like, to me these are issues that are bigger than one person, and that doesn't mean that as individual people we don't do anything about it. But what do you do about things that are bigger than one person, right?
Right.
That's where, advocacy and
Yes.
politicking and all that kind of stuff comes into play. We need at a much higher level than any person on this call is some regulations in place to prevent any corporation from wreaking the havoc on the environment that corporations are allowed to do. And I think AI is a prime example of that. They will destroy the water supply and they will burn through fossil fuels at an astronomical rate if we let them. So the idea is like to not let them in a regulatory way, in my opinion.
Yes. Thank you for pushing back on that. It was a rash thing to say. Meaning, for a long time, the conversation has been which of these tools is the most ethical? And I think that is a conversation we should put to bed, at least for the big three.
Yeah.
And to your point, be having a larger conversation about what are the policies that municipalities, states, and the Fed can put together to protect the things that do matter to human life beyond efficiency.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for me, part of my concern about, AI is, is very much tied into, a greater concern of our societal views on, workforce and labor, and that, it's all just about, kind of trying to squeeze the most productivity out of each individual person, regardless of the societal or environmental impacts, and that's an issue that I think should take part in any of these conversations we have. I think most of us are grant writers because we are trying to create a better world, better societies, and a better world. And so, what's the point of doing that if we're doing it in a way that is reinforcing the things that we're directly trying to address, right? Those are two things we need to hold. AI is an example of that. It's not the only one, though, right? I have clients who are pushing against societal, impacts of poverty while paying their staff poverty wages, right? Like, those are two things that you need to kind of figure out too, right? There's a lot of ethical things, I think, in grant writing that is outside of just this narrow scope of writing the grant and kind of a bigger picture of like, if we're really trying to address some of these societal impacts, is the work we're doing actually reinforcing them, right? And that's a concern that I have about AI is that it actually, I think, is often used to reinforce systems. I mean, it's helping to widen the income gap. I live in San Francisco. I see it here on a daily basis. Our rents had started going down, not even going down. They weren't rising as quick as usual because of the pandemic. And then AI came in, and guess what? whole new wave of evictions, whole new wave of low
Mhm.
income people getting pushed out because AI people are coming in and buying up everything, right? And then also losing entry level jobs because they're going to AI and all kinds of different things. So I think, we have these kind of bigger societal concerns that, we have to be careful to not reinforce in the grant industry as much as we're also trying to quickly get as much money as we can for the work that we're trying to do. It is a lot to hold.
I'm here this morning because I was part of a conversation with some of my old professor colleagues. Excuse me, and they were just very candid with me in saying that they were using AI to publish and do all kinds of things that I thought were quasi unethical. I'm like, but you are a professor. You're supposed to be researching this stuff and writing and reflecting and then sharing it with your other colleagues. I mean, that's what scientists do. You do something, you share it, and you get feedback. And they looked at me like, well, Melvin, you've been out of the loop for a while, so you really don't understand. And I just said, okay, I'm not here to get into all of this. I just came here to get some Jack Daniels. So, but that said, when I saw the promotion for this morning session, I said I got to listen to this because I don't think I really understand it. I've read two books and I don't know 4 or 5 articles. I still don't understand what it is. So I'm here to learn.
And Dr. Melvin, when you say you don't understand, are you talking about you don't understand the ethical considerations and concerns, or you don't like, can you just say a little
Oh,
bit more about that?
I don't understand what it can do and why it's a threat. And I mean, I'm talking a really basic understanding of. I've been ignoring it. No one has said anything to me about it being a problem or an issue. And had I not gone to this uh, luncheon with my some of my old professor friends, it never would have occurred to me that a professor would use AI to publish. That just
Mm.
seems so mind-boggling to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just it's hard for me to get my head around, and that's why I understood that I didn't understand it
Mhm.
because I didn't even know you could use AI to do something like that.
Mhm. Yeah, there's sort of at this point it's kind of an old example, but I think it was either the CDC or HHS came out with a report that was so obviously written by AI because there were all of these fake citations in it, right? And this happened 2 years ago at this point. So I think what we have is sort of a conflict of expectations around human production with the allure of it going very fast, right? And so I think what we find with whether it is a government entity, whether it's a professor, whether it's a grant writer, the attraction of AI is that I can write a grant, 100-page grant by giving AI some instructions and some context, and it will write 100 pages in 5 minutes. Right? Now, is it good? That's a totally separate question. Is it full of nonsense? That's a separate question. But the allure of having 100 pages of content in 5 minutes is mind-boggling, right? And so I think that's what we come up against is the temptation of how fast things can happen. And I think maybe there's a place for AI, particularly when we think about research, right? I mean, I think one of the big promises, again, I'm not sure we're seeing this come to fruition, but one of the promises is like given it can digest data at a rate that is so much greater than any one computer ever could before, and certainly more than any human, that ideally we would get to breakthroughs in science faster. Now, But the question becomes like, if you're an individual researcher working on a particular topic, what is lost in the process of handing that over to AI? And this is a question that I have been thinking a lot about as I use AI more and more for grant writing. What exactly is being lost? Because I'm pretty convinced I'm still better than AI, even though I know how to use AI very well. There's still something that is lost in the process, right? Is it and how do I replace that piece so that I can still use AI for efficiency, but somehow actually restructure the work so that I'm still getting to my very high level of product, but not having to do as much of the writing work, right? And I don't know, I have not put my finger on exactly what that is right now, if I'm honest.
Yeah,
I've
Dr.
heard people say that um, you need to load information into AI so it will reflect your voice, your thinking. And I went and got my old dissertation. I mean, I just grabbed stuff and put it in there to see what it would do. And then I asked it some very specific questions. The feedback that I got, I said, this machine doesn't know what it's talking about. I'm like, what in the world is this madness? And I said, well, that's okay. I'll wait. Maybe I put it in incorrectly or whatever. I don't know. But I was waiting for the next version, the next version. If you recall, when Microsoft started, they would send the product out purposefully with flaws in it. So you would have to buy the updates and everything. So I thought, okay, maybe AI is like this too. So I said, okay, I'll wait. And as I was waiting, Chat GPT, I think they're on their fifth version now. I know they're on their fourth. They may be on their fifth.
And the other thing to think about is like when AI, and also we always like to kind of say we use AI, right? But oftentimes we're talking about one specific type of AI, which is kind of like the Chat GPT LLM, large language model. I think is that what it stands for? Large language model. And basically, which does it doesn't have a brain. Like it's not it's not, it's guessing the next word based off of algorithms given to it. And when you give it content, it can guess the next word based off of how often you use a certain next word, or I don't know. I don't know how it works. It's technology stuff that I don't really care about. But at the end of the day, it's not really thinking, it's guessing words, right? And then the other part of this is that when these LLMs kind of came out, they kind of started with what, like fourth graders kind of level of being able to interpret information, or kind of regurgitate information, and the accuracy of answers were kind of moved up from upper elementary school level to middle school level to high school level, and now they are giving responses based off of from my understanding, based off of like an early college level. So they are improving. But like, if it, Dr. Music, I haven't read your dissertation, but I'm assuming if you gave it to a bunch of college freshmen, they might give you similar
Right.
responses to what that Chat GPT gave you, right? Like it's kind of like you don't really get it now, do you? Right? You tried, but you don't really get it, right? So I do think that you're right that there is going to be improvements on this, but then also you can train your, the LLM that you're using to have more of language to pull from specific to your topic or your area of expertise. So as grant writers, we can work with these. You can get 100 pages in 5 minutes, but if you work with it for several hours, you might be able to get three really good quality pages, right? Like, and then the next time you go to use it, it won't take you 3 hours, right? It might take you 1 hour. So kind of it is one of these things that you can invest in, kind of um, you know, training it on certain things up front, or providing it with language to pull from up front, and instructions of how to use that language. And I could see where, I don't think that any of your colleagues are just hopping in there and in 5 minutes getting it to write their articles, but I could see that maybe working with it could kind of be helpful in reducing the amount of time they're spending on it, or maybe even just, helping to uh make sure that the final product is something that is more understandable by a general audience or something, right? Like, that is something that you could work with it to do. Um, in the same way that other technologies can be helpful, but you have to have somebody who knows how to use them at that keyboard, or you know, it's not really working out very well. And I think at the end of the day, my big question with all of this is like why, right? Like why I mean, like is there a high probability that your colleagues are writing these articles and like nobody's really reading them anymore because they're just feeding them into their AIs and saying, give me a summary, right? And like, so then what's the point? What's the point of having all of these AIs talking to each other? Maybe we need to think about a different a way to transfer this information from one human to the other, besides having all these different GPTs talking to each other about it. And that's the way I feel about grants. I honestly feel like maybe there is a better way for us to decide who gets the grant funding than the traditional grant application in the age of AI. That's kind of where I land at this.
That's where I
Because,
land as well. And there's a part of me that just kind of hopes that this is what breaks the whole system is that grant writers are using AI to write grant applications, foundations are using AI to review applications, and we realize that the whole thing is a complete sham and that we totally rebuild the system, right? And I offer this as an example. It's probably not the answer, but as an example, what if a program person from a nonprofit could talk to an AI bot on a screen on a Zoom call for 30 minutes and just download what's in their brain, right? And then the foundation writes the proposal using AI. The organization signs off on it saying this is what, yes, we agree to these terms, this is what we're going to do. Or nonprofits come up with a single grant proposal that covers everything they do once a year. They upload it into the foundation ether, right? And foundations find them, rework the information into their snowflake of an application, right? So we just get rid of the whole, like, let's recreate the wheel every single time. I can imagine this whole thing just breaking. And honestly, as there are roles that grant writers play in organizations that are far more important to the organization than filling out an application. Filling out the application is what triggers the work, but the work that is being done is so valuable beyond the product. So I think we should just let go of the product. I mean,
the
not
product
right
of the
now,
grant
but
application, with the
yeah,
grant application being the product. Yes, yes.
correct.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've actually felt that's been true for that this issue has been true for a long time, well before AI. I mean, I
Yeah.
had my own reservations about building my career around, you know, this whole model that kind of is the middleman between the people doing the work and the people who have the money to fund the work. And like we build this big, whole um apparatus and infrastructure around grant seeking. So like, I've struggled with that from the very beginning. And so, yeah, AI kind of heightens it all even more, but I feel like it's always been there. And somehow I've continued to do what I do because I feel like in the end I am doing something good. Um, but and so I guess I'm optimistically buying into the fact that AI can help me um automate some of the more, as you said, fielding, like filling in the actual application, which I've done how many thousands of times over my career. Um, and if AI can do, especially those renewal grants, if AI can help me do those, um, then that's minimizing that piece in there rather than continuing to build it. I don't know. So I don't know the answers, but I'm pursuing, following this path optimistically, hoping that it's going to end up somewhere good. But I hear everything you're saying, Melody, and I really I just appreciate hearing all those concerns you have.
I'm thinking of a Jeopardy episode of maybe, I don't know, it's at least 5 years ago. Maybe I'm guessing, but when they had that computer, and they hyped that this is an AI product and blah 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 blah. And I watched 2 episodes of that, and I was laughing my head off because I said, "This machine can't even answer basic questions." And so the two people that were the machine was in the middle, and the two folks that were bordering it, they had these smiles on their faces, like, okay, we don't have to worry about this. And when it did punch in, 90% of the time the answer was way off. The apple, you ask about apples and they start talking about oranges. It was kind of comical.
Yeah, and I think, oftentimes I think with AI, there's always kind of this either spoken or unspoken thing of like, not yet, right? Like when we talk about it, there's a lot of things it can't do yet. But it is the speed in which it's getting better is alarming. It is so alarming how quickly it's improving from, the kind of um uh and at the same time, what really concerns me is at the same time that all technology, and right now really AI is kind of, most of what the technological advances that are, concerning to me at least, are moving at such a breakneck speed. And our regulatory process move so slow. And so, by the time there's any decision made about whether there's intellectual property theft happening by AI, like that point's moot. Like it's already been, been taken and torn apart and reassembled a million times by then. So, that's the parts that's really concerning to me too when it comes to this. um a lot of individual organizations, including nonprofits and funders and government agencies that are making decisions about how large quantities of money is being used to address huge societal problems right now, is having AI be incorporated. Like funders that said a year ago that they would disqualify you for using AI are now disclosing that they're using AI to review your process, right? To review your proposal and for preliminary scoring and things. Um, as an example, right? So like these things are happening so quickly, and at the end of the day, I don't know that there's enough of an oversight on this area for it to be, um like there's not a great code of ethics around this. There's not, um I mean, there's not even any kind of like understanding of, so we did have a grant review process here where they had to for city funding that had to be reissued because it was found that they had used AI for the preliminary screening, but then said, "Oh, don't worry, humans will do the final scoring." And then those humans were given such a large quantity of text to read that they were feeding it into, their personal GPTs to say summarize this for me, right? Or score it for me kind of thing. And so they had to reissue which held up millions of dollars that was designed for our local low income community. That basic food, food and education opportunities for kids and all this stuff was held up for, almost a year because of this, because of the folks that used the AI in that capacity used AI, there were no consequences, right? Because there wasn't really an understanding of what do we do if the people that we are asking to score these choose to use AI in a way that we're saying they shouldn't be. So it's to me it's a nightmare. It's just an absolute nightmare in a lot of ways that it's moving so quickly without any kind of ability to keep up from, well, what do we do when it's being used in a way that's detrimental to the society, right?
How are you keeping AI from accessing your external cloud reservoirs? Because I was sort of alarmed. I was doing some work, and the in the references, the endnotes, AI was pointing out things that I had written years ago, but they
Yeah,
were in the cloud.
yeah.
And I thought to myself, well, what the hell? I don't even remember what this is. And I would click on it, and it said to me, well, it was your paper. I had to ask, well, what's going on?
Do you have
And
Copilot turned on?
yes,
So
That's why.
that's what's happening. So you've given Copilot access to everything within Microsoft.
Yep. Yeah, and we are at time, so I do want to, close it out today on this very happy thought that, also all these, user agreements that we have to click yes, I agree to in order to access whatever, it is. Uh, we're handing over a lot of power and a lot of information, and nobody has time to read all that fine print or to even understand it, right? But unfortunately, again, to me, it kind of comes back to there's folks that are in positions to do something about the kind of regulatory process of this of, is it fair to say that you now have access to all of my information because I want to be able to, you know, and sometimes we're not even, it seems like we're not even given that option to opt in. And it's not very clear if you can ever even opt out. But um, I definitely want to encourage everyone to keep these conversations going. I think it's important that we create time to discuss this. And thanks to everyone for showing up today. And look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.